We were created in 2000 to provide an alternative voice to existing teacher organizations, largely because a case needed to be made for a far more comprehensive reform agenda, much more extensive than anyone was willing to propose at the time. Fixing the teaching profession requires reforms that challenge the current structure and regulation of the profession. 10 years ago, there were few organizations dedicated to solving the structural problems of the teaching profession, problems that we strongly believe have led to the profession's very ill health in nearly every respect. There was also little understanding at that time that many of the rights and privileges granted to teachers, that is, the adults, were clearly granted without sufficient attention to what would be in the best interests of children, particularly children living in poverty. We'd like to take a wee bit of the credit for the fact that 10 years later, the teacher quality problem is more fully understood and that we're seeing pockets of progress in a good majority of states. That's progress we can be proud of. I think people now get that the teaching profession needs to look much different if we're going to attract and keep the kind of talent our children deserve. What does it take to get into the profession? How are new teachers trained? How are they hired and then assigned to schools? How do they climb the ladder and get paid? And how do they end up retiring? These are all questions that need compelling, fresh answers. The work ahead is still daunting, but I am more optimistic that a healthy teaching profession is eminently achievable. Over the past several decades, the teaching profession has suffered a brain drain, as talented women and minorities now have many more career options than they once did. The teaching profession is drawing just too heavily from the bottom half of students. People now expect to have 2, 3, 4 careers. The days of someone becoming a teacher for life are in large part over. Yet the teaching profession is structured to appeal only to lifers, particularly in the way it compensates teachers. For example, much of the salary and benefits that teachers get are backloaded, meaning a disproportionate amount is reserved for the last few years a teacher is teaching. In one district that we studied, 70% of the raises that teachers received were withheld until they've been teaching 20 years. We also have come to grips with massive educational failure that is pretty unique to the United States. Poor kids get a very different quality of education than do middle-class kids. Poor kids, especially minority kids, are too often assigned to the weakest teachers. In spite of billions of dollars spent to address this problem that we call the achievement gap, we've made little headway. So our job is to help move this mountain. We have a different approach than any other teacher organization. We believe that the institutions that have so much authority over the teaching profession need to make massive changes, both in policy and in practice. This includes states, that being state boards and state legislatures, school districts, teachers' unions, and higher education. We dedicate our time to documenting the impact that these institutions have on teacher quality, and it is often quite negative. Everything we do is aimed at getting these institutions to change their policies and practices. Let me give you one example of how we're transforming teacher quality and the various leverage points that we're applying. Reforming teacher preparation has been a really tough nut to crack. In fact, a lot of foundations we talk to don't even want to try. It is so frustrating. Many people have criticized teacher preparation over the years, but no reform effort has seemed to work. What we're doing is something that no one has ever done before. We're actually rating well over 1,000 education schools that graduate a couple 100,000 new teachers each year. We're confident that this is the right strategy. We think one of the reasons others have failed is that no one has been willing to call out individual programs as being really good or just really bad. We are also making sure that the customers of teacher preparation programs hear about our ratings, that is, future teachers and school districts that are hiring new teachers. And that's why we've asked U.S. News and World Report to publish the results. They reach millions. In doing so, we're driving the market away from bad schools and towards good schools. We're going to be doing these ratings every year. because we also know that these institutions are only likely to change practice if they have a chance to improve next year's rating. Honestly, I think we're successful because when it comes to making sure that every student has a quality teacher, we're willing to say some hard things without worrying too much about being loved. Specifically, I can think of a number of approaches we take that make us particularly effective. Our research into any issue has to be exhaustive. We do this because knowledge is paramount. For example, if we know more about a school's own contract than anyone in the school district knows, people are much more likely to listen to what we have to say. Our work always measures an institution's performance against a goalpost. We don't just describe a problem, we grade it. Not everyone likes report cards, but I don't think anyone can deny that they're very effective and motivating. We know our audience and what we need to do to get their attention. For example, with our state teacher policy yearbook, we don't just do one national volume, but 52. That's a commitment to produce a publication that's 9,000 pages long. We do that because state policymakers find national reports easy to dismiss. They're a dime a dozen. They'll only read a report that's about them. The yearbooks accordingly get a ton of attention. All of our work builds on previous work. For the most part, we think one-off studies are generally ineffective. Lastly, we're fair and we're transparent. We provide institutions the opportunity to correct us before we go public with any of our findings. And we even let them submit their comments for publication, no matter how critical they are of us. This is actually a very easy question for us to answer because of the way we design our work products. Everything we write basically applies a yardstick. We always ask the question, how well does this institution measure up against teacher quality goals? Not only are we able to track the progress they're making, that being a state, a district, or a university, but we're also able to track our own impact. We measure our own progress. If we're not seeing movement from year to year, we not only give a program a bad rating, we give ourselves a bad rating because our work isn't having any impact. Fortunately, we've seen tremendous progress. For example, 2 years ago, only one state got a grade of C or better on the state teacher policy yearbook. This time, 14 did. That's incredible. That being said, well over half of all states still have grades of D or below. We have a long way to go. Let me give you just a few concrete examples of some of the legislative changes that have been made and that we've helped to drive. Indiana has completely overhauled its rules for entry into the profession and for what it takes to qualify for a teacher license, all based on our recommendations. In Connecticut, Minnesota, and Oklahoma, they all now require that their new elementary teachers have to take a very strong test to show they know how to teach reading. And in California, Illinois, New York, Washington, those states have all made significant changes to their rules that govern entry into the profession, greatly expanding the alternate route programs for new teachers. We've had to develop some very thick skins about some of the things people say about us, but there is one mischaracterization that is widespread, and that is that we just want to blow up schools of education. That's flat out false, and let me explain. We know from research that first-year teachers really struggle, and as a result, greatly impede kids' progress. Research shows this, that first-year teachers routinely, no matter how they are prepared, produce much lower gains in their students than even a second-year teacher. In particular, kids who get a lot of first-year teachers, that is, they're attending schools with high turnover, they really suffer in the hands of a system where we routinely deliver poorly prepared teachers to the classroom. We strongly believe that a reinvented system of formal training could greatly improve the effectiveness of new teachers. In short, we believe schools of education are the future of teacher prep, but we believe they need a major overhaul. We're very proud of our track record and the policy wins that we've posted in school districts and also at the state level. In 2006, we dreamed up this thing called the State Teacher Policy Yearbook, in which we lay out teacher qualities, over 30, 40 goals for states and how well they measure up. And when we put our first yearbook out, that's now 5 editions ago, states largely ignored us or they just were angry, telling us that we had it all wrong. But that isn't the case anymore. They've come to really accept it. The yearbook actually laid much of the foundation for what states needed to achieve in the Race to the Top competition. The Department of Education drew heavily from the yearbook for the policy language it needed to guide the teacher portion of the competition. As proud as I am of both our district and state work, I know that our greatest accomplishment is yet to come. By rating the nation's schools of education, we're doing something that's never been done before, that a lot of people wanted to do, and we're just going ahead and doing it. The uproar over this work from the schools of education around the country actually gives us great confidence that we're on the right track. Because we were created by a conservative organization, we got tagged as being ultra-conservative by association. We don't hear that much anymore, largely because I think there's very little evidence that we're anything but what we say we are, completely nonpartisan. I honestly don't even know who anyone in my office voted for in the last election. Our bigger challenge remains a perception on the part of some that we are anti-union, and to some that translates into anti-teacher. We definitely hold views that are not embraced by either of the two big teacher unions, that being the NEA or the AFT, at least not publicly so, but that shouldn't translate into being anti-union. Believe me, I spent 10 years trying to implement reforms in Baltimore, and it was rarely the union that was the stumbling block. More often it was the culture of the school district or some state law or regulation that stood in the way. Unions play a vital, important, and often positive role. There's a tendency to assume that school districts always make the right decisions, but they don't. That power balance is really, really important. First of all, it's important to remember we have a rather unique policy agenda in that the work that we produce each year has built upon the work that we did in the previous year. Each year, for example, we produce 52 volumes of the State Teacher Policy Yearbook, and that's one for each state and the District of Columbia. It shows states how they can improve teacher quality. Each year we expand and improve what we call our TR3 database. That's where we post collective bargaining agreements and state policies for well over 100 school districts. It's important to know that we don't just post documents such as state laws, regulations, school board policies, and teacher contracts. We analyze and code some 14,000 pages each year, doing all of the heavy lifting for our users. And now those two efforts are joined by our new commitment. That's a national review of teacher preparation programs. We're rating over 1,150 colleges and universities on the quality of the teacher preparation that they provide. We'll do that this year and each year for the foreseeable future. Within that very defined agenda, there isn't a day that goes by that we haven't identified multiple ways to use what we learned to better leverage reforms. We have 3 specific projects in mind that we would like to pursue. A big priority for us is to develop an inspection service that we would offer to state school superintendents. We'd visit and inspect teacher preparation programs. The purpose of this service, modeled after the system that's used in the United Kingdom, is to give state superintendents an objective, external, on-the-ground evidence that they need to assess the quality of the programs that they oversee and approve. We have a group of state school chiefs who are very interested in serving as the pioneers for this service. Second, we want to do a much better job of breaking up the data-packed state teacher policy yearbook. It needs to be broken up into much more digestible pieces, as well as make the website where it appears more interactive, as that's how most people access it. We need to make it much easier for someone to quickly find an answer. Third, right now our TR3 database is a sea of data. It contains some great data, but there's too much of it. We need to do a better job of highlighting and presenting key data that it contains and packaging it for meaningful public consumption. Probably the most important work that we need to take on is to create a set of teacher standards that align with the new Common Core standards for students. There just aren't going to be enough teachers who can teach to the rigor of these new national standards if we don't change the content training teachers get. This problem is not on people's radar. Another priority area of work for us is to get more involved in the quality of teacher tests. Those are the tests that teachers have to take to get a license from their state to teach. And with notable exceptions, these tests are extremely easy to pass. Many states allow prospective teachers to fail 50, 60, even 70% of the questions and still pass. We would never have such a low standard for our students.